Hey, it's John, and welcome to the interview. Today, I'm joined by Joel Solomon, who is the author of The Clean Money Revolution, Reinventing Power, Purpose, and Capitalism. He's also the chairman of Renewal Funds, which has raised over 200 million. It's a $200 million mission venture capital firm. He's invested in over 100 early stage companies in North America, delivering above market returns while creating positive social and environmental change. You can check out more about Joel over at joelsolomon.org or renewalfunds.com. Both of those will be linked up under this interview. So Joel, thank you so much for stopping by and having a chat today.
I'm so glad you're willing to have me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I watched a couple of your speeches, really like the work you're doing. So just tell us a little bit about the life of Joel up to this point and give our listeners a little bit of your background, and then we'll jump through the questions.
Okay. To keep it simple, I grew up in the southern United States during the 50s and 60s. So I am one of those 60s influenced idealists that became a pragmatist and realized that my family, my father became an entrepreneur, child of an immigrant, built shopping malls and was successful at that. And so I was the beneficiary of immigrant family working their way up. And I also was influenced a lot about the questioning that was going on. I came around to the fact that money, finance, and business are incredibly powerful tools that can actually be directed towards doing good in the world as well as making money. And that is a summary of the career that I went through. There are a lot of experiences there. I've had some extraordinary opportunities to be creative with capital as a small family office working for someone. And out of that grew the fund, which is our way to articulate there's plenty of money to be made on doing the right thing in the world.
All right, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing then at Renewal Funds.
Renewal funds theory is based on going into a financial tool that's fairly standard, which is venture capital, but applying a mission and purpose screen to it. So our belief 12 years ago when we went out to raise outside money was that there's a growing connection in people's mind that what I own as an investor and what the companies do to people and places around the world is something I actually have some responsibility for. I need to look at the whole picture in order to meet my own values and morals. And I was fortunate to be exposed to a lot of the early thinkers about that, and it just became a given that when I look at a business investment, I should consider what its impact and influence is in the world, and that there are a whole lot of sectors which provide fantastic financial returns as well. So Renewal Fund's goal was to prove that. We are now, we're based in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. We invest on both sides of the Canadian and US border. We're up to something like 300 investors, and they represent a wide variety of interesting organizations and people, all of whom are on somewhere on that scale. They either already really want this, or they're very curious about it. They're being hounded by their kids, or global events are starting to cause them to think about their connection to those events through their money.
Yeah, and there seems to be a kind of a growing awareness, as you said, in conscious capitalism, other types of organizations that are kind of sharing that, you can do a lot of good with business, especially with a lot of younger. Do you find a lot of younger generations are resistant to capitalism, or are they? Obviously, they probably like a lot of what you're doing, right? As far as like thinking of it not only as a financial return, but as a vehicle for good. But how is the younger demographic talking with you?
Well, it's a mixed bag, like
Yeah.
older demographic too. But
Yeah.
You're correct that there's a huge awareness. The fact of the information era has made people able to know more.
Right.
And this is not just about, okay, do young people have money to invest or not? They're also choosing where to work. And they want to know what the company is about and that it's doing something they're proud of and that they want to be part of. Then there are consumers, and consumers are getting far more intelligent and informed about where did this come from? How are you treating the supply chain, the workers, the environmental issues? How are you doing business? And I want to be involved with that which I feel the most affinity with. So the trend is going across investment, employment, and consumer products, and probably more areas. It's unstoppable, this concept. It's too obvious. And the more the information era brings us the ability to know the answers to these questions, it demystifies a lot. And I would say we have global climate, justice, political crisis, among other crises. The global population has doubled in my lifetime, more than doubled. It's slowed down, but it's not stopping. And I'm concerned about the future. And I think my job is to do that.
Yeah. A lot of people join you in that fear then, or that line of thinking. So
Yeah.
I think a question that comes up for me or a lot of people is how do you, from an investment perspective, is there a certain index or something that we use to define a fund or a company's impact on environment or social issues or whatever might be important for that particular person?
There's a growing body of material out there and organizations tracking, rating, all kinds of things. It will take time for that to fully mature. We now can find out a lot more than we did very recently. I would say that the first key point is to ask questions and to state very clearly what your values are. So you walk in open up your first retirement account. What's it invested in? Tell me about those companies. What's your philosophy about that? Well, maximum return, global diversification, things kind of the standard way that is a really intelligent way to build wealth over time. Invest in the heavy parts of the economy and ride it on up as industrialization grows. But if I'm concerned about species collapse, even human impacted geological dimensions, am I owning slaves? Am I poisoning other people's babies? What are the factory? You go down this list, and we are more aware. So yes, there are any number of sources to go out. And I would just say in this era, all you got to say, search for what you're looking for, you'll find it. And you'll find there's a huge world out there. And you need to put pressure on the people you give your money to ask them to meet your values.
Right.
I would like to make one more point about this. The emergence of renewable energy is not just a fun, idealized, flaky thing. The entire transportation sector, built environment, food systems, everything we do is with the information era and awareness is going to get cleaner and less harmful and more generative, because science is making it very clear to us that we have to. So there's lots of money to be made in doing better.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So how can the small business owner or the public, let's talk about like investing, for example, because I think your fund is a certain threshold for people to invest in. And it sounds like you're pretty booked out for a while and all that kind of stuff. But let's say you're a small business or a public individual, and you buy into this idea that, yes, I would like to invest instead of just investing for a return only without thinking about the impact, I want to do both, right? I would like to get a return plus put my money towards something that is going to help others or feels good to me.
Yes.
What are some ways that they can get involved in that?
Well, first of all, let's call it all returns. If I give away money at my religion or to a health charity or feed people or any of that, I mean, most of us also do philanthropic things. This is not philanthropic, as I've just attempted to make the point
Right.
that there are emerging industries that are going to leave behind incumbent industries pretty quickly. So there's a financial argument to look for what's emerging and what is emerging through necessity besides just innovation. We've got some problems and they need to get solved. So the first place to start is asking questions. And those questions can be to friends and associates. They can be to whoever you walk in the door to see to talk about investing, banking, purchasing. And it's becoming more common now that that kind of transparency has to be made available. There are various ratings agencies, and rather than try to map all that out, I would just say there are good housekeeping seals of approval type situations being created now regularly. Is there child labor? Is there sweatshop conditions? What are the toxicity issues? Things like that. People want to know this. And back to the consumer wants to know, the employee wants to know, the investor wants to know, and their children want to know even more, is the trend line. So if you're going to be in business, you need to think about these things, about your own products and services. If you're the average person who's got some savings and maybe bought a house early on and they've got equity there, and they want to diversify, there are all kinds of products now that are screened for certain issues. So if you want to be fossil fuel free, you can find investment products that offer you that. If you don't want to invest in guns and cigarettes and tobacco, this has been going on for decades. So you have to do a little work. Big firms, pretty much everybody in wealth management is creating products to meet this growing niche market, which is soon bigger than a niche. Maybe it is already. There's trillions of dollars invested with some kind of social or environmental or legal or diversity kinds of screens put on it. This is less exotic than even 5 years ago. And it will become, if you look at fintech and new financial products that are coming out for consumers to be able to invest small amounts of money all over the world in interesting entrepreneurs and things, that's another area that is going to get, that's riskier. So you've got to decide your risk return ratio things. And but there is now a product for all of these questions.
Yeah, and I remember we interviewed Paul Herman of the Hip Investor. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, but they actually have an account where they have an index, right, that will filter based on a certain criteria. And I think the minimum to invest with them is only something like $100 or something like that. So it's pretty low, unless I'm misquoting him here.
Well, what I'd say is there are mass market products.
Right.
I thought Paul was in a little bit bigger scale than that, but maybe he's got a product now.
I think he has a product for the public, he said, that is for
great.
small investors too.
Well, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And you're seeing a lot of these.
Mm-hmm.
If you just, you know how you find out about a world you didn't know anything about, and then you start looking into it and you see it's everywhere and you're like, how did I miss this?
Right.
This is where we're at in the growth of this field.
Yeah. So what are some of the areas that you mentioned there's a few areas that are financially as well as socially important areas that are going to leave behind some of their incumbents and things like that. What are a couple of examples you could share?
Very soon, we will not be driving petrochemical driven vehicles. We'll have autonomous vehicles in cities, probably, if not everywhere, that are self-driving, and they will be designed for lowest impact because why would you do anything else? And the same is going to happen in the built environment. You're seeing LEED certification and greener buildings, energy conservation, better insulation, better window and door materials to stop heat loss. Every aspect of the built environment is a good place to invest right now in these reforms. Name your topic, and this is probably true. I got into this because I inherited a genetic kidney disease and told I could die soon, live long. There was nothing I could do about it. That made me a label reader. Like, what is the kidney? It was a kidney disease. What does the kidney do? Kidney cleans toxins from the blood. Why
Right.
would I have toxins in my blood? What are they? Where are they come? Oh, my just basic food has got chemicals in here that, if you look them up, have some questionable effects and things like this, but they make it cheaper food, or they make it more profitable food. So it's kind of name your sector. And the mining sector, the oil sector, they're improving their standards. They're being less wasteful. They're doing what they can because they're under this same pressure, and their marketplace is at risk.
Hmm. So it's really just the pressure on them from the public and the awareness and the information age and all that kind of stuff, that people can't get away with these questionable tactics to make an extra buck quick. They have to actually look at this stuff.
And they find out that there's ways to make a lot of bucks on the modern,
Yeah.
educated, informed consumer who actually cares about what's going on behind their clothing. My shirt I'm wearing. I don't know,
Hmm.
but I know that if I looked into it, it would not be that pretty, probably.
Right. How long do you think before we have autonomous cars driving everyone around? Seems like
It's
sooner
pretty
rather
quick.
than later, you think, huh?
I think it's pretty quick.
Hmm.
And there will be many of those. Technology will help. It will hurt and it will help. And
Yeah.
that's probably the case with most societal trends.
Well, think of all the drunk driving that won't occur anymore, right? If you have autonomy, all the lives that are saved. I can't remember how many people a year are killed by that, but it's pretty significant, right?
That's right.
So
But the big one is carbon. And
carbon.
cities are just, look at the crowded, massive cities across the world, and imagine that all that burnt oil
Ugh.
is reduced.
Yeah.
What does that do for healthcare costs for a society? You go on, you just follow the train, and there's lots.
So, so overall, are you pretty optimistic about our society, about the systems that we're in? Do you feel empowered by where we're headed and the results we're starting to generate?
Well, that's an excellent, correct question. And I would say that I'm very mixed.
Hmm.
There's lots to be hopeful for. As now an old guy in my mid 60s, having seen humans make choices and societies make choices, there are reasons for concern. Um, so I like to say, here, we're in serious trouble. Here, I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
The human
Hmm.
spirit, like we want it, we care about the future. Our job is to look out for future generations. That's the life force
Right.
working in us. And I think once we realize there are solutions and there are ways to do that, that we will rally.
What are some changes you feel like need to be made in the way things are done economically or investing or in any of those kind of categories? I mean, you said up here you're worried. What are some of the things you worry about?
Well, I have been uncomfortable watching in the last few decades the anti-government sentiment that goes on, because we don't have another watchdog of the commons. And the
Mm-hmm.
commons is our air, water, soil, minerals, all these things that are just here on the earth. And with going on 8 billion people, that will probably reach 10 in your lifetime,
Yeah.
how are we all going to live here together? So number one is whoever that regulator of the commons is, which is typically government, and I don't know what's going to replace that, might reform some of the ways decisions happen or things like that. So we need wise government regulation to steward these resources and be sure they're handled fairly and they don't cause damaging side effects in huge ways. Secondly, we need taxation systems that take care of society as well as support entrepreneurship. And what we've been in a period of is it's politically expedient and successful to start waving around tax cuts, and particularly for the wealthy who end up being the ones that help get people elected the most and things like that, and who may have interest they can invest in that this supports. So I believe tax reform, I believe a social safety net that gives basic health, education, welfare, and probably housing, maybe a guaranteed minimum income, will be necessary parts of the future. I can only predict so much, but I see those trend lines, and we have to think about the whole picture, and or we really risk causing a lot of damage and trauma to what comes after us. We had a long period of industrialization where it was kind of a wide open, infinite bounty, but we reached the limits. So what's intelligent to do now?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting what'll come of that. So you're for like I don't know this isn't necessarily a political show, but I think it's important to bring up. You're for a universal income. You're for some of those things that help to provide a safety net, mainly because innovation is going to take away a lot of jobs, or is that kind of the primary concern there as far as that goes?
I worry about sheer global population, and population is the very difficult. I wouldn't call it untouchable, but that is a very, very tough issue. And we know the China experiment, which they finally just busted out of, and people were doing all kinds of things to have more kids. Education is, I think, thought of, education and empowerment of women globally. If you look at Paul Hawkins' work with Drawdown, that's about the 100 most important effects of climate change and what can be done, and you total together the things that have to do with empowerment of women and education for children and healthcare and such, that is the single most important thing we can do to turn around climate
Is what now?
challenges. Support women and children. And have a look at the book. I won't be able to properly articulate the whole thing.
Sure.
But the point is, we have let unbridled capitalism go past its reasonable point of sustainability. There is now an unleashed appetite to exploit every last thing if it's not regulated or looked over or in some way protected.
Interesting. Yeah. So is it up to the government then to step in and intervene, or is it? I mean, if you leave it up to the business owners themselves, do we have enough awareness for that, or is it just too tempting to continue to expand?
Ignore politics at our peril. Run for office, support people who run for offices, pay attention, know what's going on, stay involved. Look closely at the organizations that represent you if you're a business person, and don't just assume that their policies are aligned for long-term best interests for everyone, and put pressure on them to be wise voices for stability for the long term. I think stability is underrated, and we're in political times where it's almost ignored. It's just, the one hitting the other and a fight, just a kind of brawl for power. But we cannot turn away from that, because that is how we are governed and where it comes from, and the rules are set. So it's messy. It's easier to turn the other cheek and say they're all the same, but that's not accurate. We're not all the same. We have different sets of values, different motivations, different inspirations, and it's important to choose well.
Yeah. Well said. So let's switch up to you then again. As we get towards the tail end of the interview here, I always like to ask folks I speak with about kind of their own lives a little bit and where they're headed. What are you most proud of so far in your journey, Joel?
Good question. I am proud that I made some choices that the deathbed really helped with. When you get told you're going to die,
Right.
It does tend to bump up your depth, your thoughtfulness. I mean, you could just hide from it. You can run from it and anesthetize. But I was really intrigued by the reality of, okay, your kidneys are going to fail, and you would die if it weren't for modern medicine.
And this was in your 20s, right? And I remember
In my
hearing
20s.
that's a pretty young
And
age to be told you might die. So that did that change your whole mindset, I bet.
it really started clarifying things for me. And I started studying cultures and history and life and death, some of the kind of more spiritual and emotional aspects of that. And it helped me come to understand that human existence is a series of babies turning into elders
Mm.
and doing everything that they can to be sure that the tribe or the nation or that the people go forward and have something better. Better is, of course, a term that we define in different ways. But I think that it caused me to get clear about my own values and to make some clear commitments about what I would be involved in or not, and the values alignment of those, which gave me joy and happiness. Was the surprise. That was the surprise gift.
Hmm. Yeah, and you were kind of you grew up in the 60s. You said it looked, I think from your TED talk, you said you had a long beard and hair and all that. Like you were pretty much, were you like a nomadic kind of hippie at some point, or were you
Yeah.
traveling in the van around with everybody, or?
I never had a van. I did hitchhike
Oh.
across the country and such, but I would say that I got kicked into a period of seeking and searching.
Mm.
I took care of a remote orca research laboratory and fed the dogs and watered the plants and turned on the tape recorder when the orcas came because they were just deciphering their language at the time. And I bought box loads of books and absorbed as much of the kind of wisdoms of different traditions to come to basically, they all say, look out for the future, be a good person, look out for the future, and take care of the Garden of Eden.
Hmm.
And
That's what you learned from all of that, pretty much.
that's what I
What was
believe.
that
Yeah,
again?
that's what
Say
I
that
believe.
again. Be a good person. You have to
Be a good
requote.
person, take care of things,
Mm-hmm.
and take care of this. Let's see, be a good person, do the right things, look out for the future, and look after the Garden of Eden.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that gave me a philosophy to live life by. I brought it back to a very pragmatic engagement. I mean, engaging in the financial system was somewhat of a, well, here's an area that has awesome power and could really use a lot of reform as well. What an exciting challenge.
Yeah, that's an interesting segue from kind of having this, almost this hippie life of like reading and learning and finding yourself to like, oh, I'm going to go into money and finance, which you often think of as a very different field, right? But
Yes, I
an
had to come off
opportunity.
the I had to come off the mountaintop of purity and perfection
Mm,
and step into the mosh pit of of swirling humanity,
yeah.
and I just felt that it was more important to get in the mix and see if I could help rather than become aloof from it all.
Become an enlightened person above it all kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that. So, all right. And then final question for you about yourself. Like, what kind of impact do you want to, with the time you have left on this journey, what kind of impact do you want to make with the rest of your time?
Two things come to mind. One is I want people to understand that our name is on our money
Hmm.
and that we have responsibility for the choices around money. So I believe that if the major world religions took that on and it became the ethic of survival for the species, we'd do a lot better. And secondly, I'm going to repeat a point from this interview, but to say we, you and me, and all the listeners are the ancestors of what comes next, whether we have bloodline or not. I have children that I'm married into. I don't have bloodline, but I am now the eldest male in a large, sprawling family of all kinds, relatives and stuff. My job is to leave things better.
Hmm. And
Period.
how are you spreading these doctrines? I mean, you have a book, you're speaking, you're sharing your thought leadership.
I'd say the other part to add to that is just attempting to be as legitimately aligned with my rhetoric as possible. I'm imperfect. It's imperfect. There is no perfect. And we're all making compromises constantly. Who knows what insect I stepped on the way over, all this kind of thing. There's no way to be perfect. So we're all in the struggle together, and we can aspire to do less harm, do more good. That's
Very well.
That's a practice.
Very well said. So Joel, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your journey and some insights with us today. Any final words? I know you said a lot there at the end. Any final words you want to leave everybody with? And then everyone who's listening can check you out at joelsolomon.org or renewalfund.com. And in your book, again, is The Clean Money Revolution. We'll have all those things linked up below the interview.
Here's what I'd like to share.
Sure.
We are in need of a spiritual evolution as humanity, which comes to embrace and take responsibility for the long-term future. And if we do that, then we're going to have a good chance.
Any resources you want to leave people with then on that, or any way we can move it an inch towards that in this talk?
Well, I have to go back to watch the connection between myself and my money.
Got it.
And what my money does on my behalf in my name.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds like a good theme for this talk then. So, all right, everybody, hope you enjoyed this interview with Joel Solomon, and we will catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody.